Desiderata, Latin, desired things, is a 1927 prose poem by American writer Max Ehrmann, largely unknown in the author's lifetime. The text became widely known after its use in devotional and spoken word recordings in 1971 and 1972. History. In 1927, American writer Max Ehrmann, 1872–1945, wrote the prose poem Desiderata, which was first published in the Poems of Max Ehrmann in 1948. In 1956, the Reverend Frederick Cates, rector of St. Paul's Church in Baltimore, Maryland, included Desiderata in a compilation of devotional materials for his congregation. The compilation included the church's foundation date, Old St. Paul's Church, Baltimore, AD 1692. Consequently, the date of the text's authorship was, and still is, widely mistaken as 1692, the year of the church's foundation. Uses in popular culture. There have been many uses of the poem in the popular canon. When U.S. Democratic presidential hopeful Adlai Stevenson died in 1965, a guest in his home found the Desiderata near his bedside and discovered that Stevenson had planned to use it in his Christmas cards. This contributed further to the poem becoming widely known. The text was widely distributed in poster form in the 1960s and 1970s, calling it Spock Thoughts. Leonard Nimoy recited the poem on his 1968 album, Two Sides of Leonard Nimoy. This version also appeared on the 1995 re-release of Leonard Nimoy Presents Mr. Spock's Music from Outer Space. His rendition is not the only one to change the second-to-last sentence from "be cheerful" to "be careful," in concluding her January 8, 1970, interview with David Frost. Actress Joan Crawford recited Desiderata in late 1971 and early 1972. Les Crane's spoken word recording of Desiderata, the lead track on his 1971 Warner Brothers album Desiderata, peaked at number 8 on the Billboard chart, number 4 on the Canadian RPM magazine chart, and number 6 on the UK Melody Makers chart. It made number 4 on the Australian Singles Chart in 1971. The producers of Crane's recording assumed that the poem was too old to be in copyright, but the publicity surrounding the record led to clarification of Ehrmann's authorship and his family eventually receiving royalties. The British band In the Nursery adapted the poem to music on its 1992 album Duality. A Spanish-language version by Mexican actor Arturo Benavides topped the Mexican charts for 6 weeks in 1972. In 1972, National Lampoon did a parody on this prose entitled Deteriorata, which featured the line, "You are a fluke of the universe," in response to his government losing its majority in the Canadian federal election. 1972 Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau quoted Desiderata by reassuring the nation that the universe is unfolding as it should. Quote, he also quoted the poem's final stanza at the end of his concession speech after losing the 1979 election to Joe Clark. In a 1980 episode of the British TV series The Professionals entitled Discovered in a Graveyard, part of the poem is recited by George Cowley. Gordon Jackson. On August 26, 2010, a bronze statue of Ehrmann sitting on a park bench was unveiled in Terre Haute, Indiana, his hometown, with a sculpture done by Bill Wolfe. On a nearby walkway, some lines of the poem are also available to be read by passers-by. Actor Morgan Freeman, interviewed on Oprah Winfrey's Masterclass television special, 2012, expressed how deeply the poem Desiderata shaped his life. Reggae band SOJA has a Grammy-nominated album titled Amid the Noise and Haste in reference to this poem. Canadian indie rock band The New Pornography's song You Tell Me Where references Desiderata by name. Lazy Boy. The band has a song, Desiderata, which quotes this poem on their album Lazy Boy TV. Director Nicholas Pesce's 2016 horror The Eyes of My Mother features a scene in which the main character quotes the first two sentences of Desiderata in Portuguese. In Christian Cameron's book The Red Knight, a queen is given the namesake Desiderata. In 2016, in celebration of 25th anniversary of the Philippine drama anthology series Maalala Mo Kaya, a spoken-word music recording of the poem, recorded in both English and Filipino, was performed by TBUP choir and OPM singers Lisa Longa, Martin Nievera, Gary Valenciano, Lani Mesalucha, Ogie Alcacid, Jaja Padilla and Sharon Cuneta, with a spoken narration of the poem by the program's host Charo Santos Concio, and included on the compilation album Live Songs with Charo Santos. Copyright status. The poem's copyright A962,402 was registered by Ehrmann on January 3, 1927, as Go placidly amid the noise in the haste, etc. card, quote, and was renewed by his widow, Bertha K. Ehrmann, in 1954. In 1942, Max Ehrmann gave permission to Dr. Charles Moore, A.U.S. Army psychiatrist, to distribute copies of the poem to soldiers. 3 years after Ehrmann's death, his widow included Desiderata in the Poems of Max Ehrmann, published in 1948 by the Bruce Humphreys Publishing Company of Boston. In 1967, Robert L. Bell acquired the publishing rights from Bruce Humphreys Publishing Company, where he was president, and then bought the copyright from Richard Wright, nephew and heir to the Ehrmann works. In August 1971, the poem was published in Success Unlimited magazine, without permission from Robert L. Bell. In a 1976 lawsuit against the magazine's publisher, Combined Registry Company, the court ruled, and subsequently the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals upheld, that copyright had been forfeited because the poem had been authorized for publication without a copyright notice in the 1940s, and that the poem was therefore in the public domain.